Negotiations. The village chief's house was just off the plaza, and it was there that the negotiations for the price of their rescue would take place. Of course, Ains's goal was information, not monetary reward. That said, simply asking for information would be far too suspicious. True, in a small village like this, there would probably be no issue with asking for information directly. The problem was what came after. Unless there was a complete information blackout, the incident here would become known to many people. There was a nearly 100% chance it would reach the ears of those in power. And if those powerful figures tried to make contact with Ains, revealing his ignorance now could lead to him being taken advantage of during future negotiations. Was it foolish to be wary of something that might not even happen? No, that would be like dashing out into traffic. Eventually, you would be caught in a fatal accident. Strength is relative. Ains was stronger than anyone in this village, but there was no guarantee he was stronger than everyone in this world. He could not let his guard down, not until he knew whether anything existed that could kill him. Because Ains Oolgaun was a guild that had never known defeat since its founding, he could not allow that name to be dragged through the mud. Sunlight streamed through the lattice door, chasing the darkness into the corners of the room. As if to avoid the light, Ains moved his gauntleted arm, which rested on a crudely made table. The table wobbled, its construction perhaps shoddy. His staff was propped up in a corner of the room, out of the way. He recalled the astonished looks in the villagers' eyes. To be honest, he hadn't expected to stand out this much. He still couldn't shake his Yggdrasil mindset, and he had already made countless blunders today alone. "Thank you for waiting." A man sat down in the seat across from him. A woman stood behind him. The village chief looked to be around 40 years old. He was a man with suntanned skin and wrinkles deeper than his age would suggest. His frame was incredibly sturdy, a clear testament to a life of hard labor in the fields. His hair was streaked with white, nearly half of it having lost its color. Ains had the idle thought that the events of the last few minutes had probably aged him even further. The chief's simple cotton clothes were stained with dirt, but they carried no odor. The woman was about the same age as the chief. She had an air about her that suggested she might have been a slender beauty in her youth, but long years of farm work had worn most of it away. Freckles dotted her face, and what remained was a thin, haggard woman. Her black, shoulder-length hair was messy and frayed. Despite being sun-kissed, she radiated a somber atmosphere. "Please." The wife placed a shabby container on the table. She had offered steaming water, plain hot water, but Ains raised a hand to decline it, partly because he felt no thirst at all, and partly because he couldn't possibly remove his mask. Still, he felt a pang of guilt for refusing. Witnessing the effort it had taken, he couldn't help but feel apologetic. What effort? The effort of boiling water. It had begun with striking a flint to create a spark. She had carefully placed thin wood shavings over the tiny ember to nurture a larger flame. From there, she moved it to the hearth to build it into a proper fire. It had taken a considerable amount of time just to produce this hot water. "My apologies, after you went to such trouble." "No, not at all. Please raise your head." Startled by Ains's slight bow, the couple panicked. They likely couldn't believe that a being of overwhelming power would bow his head to mere villagers like themselves. To Ains, it wasn't strange at all. While it was true that he was the powerful one, they were his negotiation partners. Intimidation might be effective, but for now, a friendly approach was the better choice. Of course, there was also the option of using magic like Charm Person to extract the information and then altering their memories with a highest tier spell, just as he had done with the sisters. But that should be reserved as a last resort. He hadn't expected it to consume MP so rapidly, second by second. So that's MP consumption. A feeling of exhaustion and an unsettling sensation of something being scraped away from within him. Even now, a heavy weight lingered in the core of his body. Ains's face twisted. Altering a memory of just a few seconds to make them believe he had been wearing the mask and gauntlets from the very beginning had seemingly consumed half of his MP. It was a massive loss. He definitely needed to test the effects of all his spells somewhere. Well then, if you'll excuse me, shall we begin our negotiations? Yes. The village chief gulped. Ains, too, began to spin the gears in his mind at high speed. He hadn't been able to use magic on the knights because of the villagers' prying eyes, but in a private place like this, it would be easier to just use a spell like Charm Person and forcibly extract what he needed. However, when he considered the potential consequences, it wasn't a viable option. Therefore, he had to obtain the necessary information through words. Ugh, what a pain. To be blunt, how much can you afford to pay? The village is in this state right now. At most, we could only offer some copper coins. Copper coins? Ains exclaimed in a sharp, surprised tone. That is a bit too little, I'm afraid. But we couldn't possibly manage silver coins. I see. Ains nodded internally without speaking. Copper and silver, so these two were the basic currency in circulation in a village. The problem was the monetary value of a copper coin. If he didn't know its worth in Japanese yen, he would run into all sorts of trouble later. It would be a problem if he went to a town and didn't understand the value of the currency. Though, he figured he could just observe the shops and prices to get a handle on it. But even to get to a town, he needed to gather a certain amount of information first.
Silver coins? Did you think I was asking for silver coins? Surely, a village like this has no gold coins. He was leading him on, but the conversation was developing quite conveniently. It was a wonder the man could serve as a village chief. Or perhaps that wasn't what the job entailed. Ains erased the mental image he had of a company president who had built a fortune in a single generation. But how do you handle your shopping? We do that with copper coins. Silver or gold coins are... The village chief shook his head silently. Then what shall we do? I am not a philanthropist, after all. Pretending to be deep in thought, Ains stealthily opened his item box. He took out 2 Yggdrasil gold coins. One was engraved with the profile of a woman, the other a man. The former came into use after the massive Valkyrie's Downfall update, while the latter was the coin from before it. Their value was the same, but his emotional attachment to them was different. The older currency had been with him from most of his journey in Yggdrasil, from the time he started playing, to the founding of Ainz-Ul Gaon, to their glory days. By the time of the update that occurred when the guild was at its peak, coins had become little more than things to be tossed into the item box. The few coins that floated in the air when he, as a skeleton mage, had first hunted a monster in the field with magic. The pile of coins he earned after desperately fending off aggressive monsters when he snuck into a dungeon solo. The gleam of the data crystals he sold after conquering a dungeon with the members of Ainz-Ul Gaon. He shook off the nostalgia. Even so, Ains put the old coin away and held on to the new one. Let's change the subject slightly. If I wanted to buy something with this coin, what kind of value would I get? He flicked the gold coin onto the table. The eyes of both the chief and his wife went wide. It is a very old coin. Is it unusable? I think it can be used. Please wait a moment. The chief left his seat and went to the back of the room, returning with a peculiar object. What he brought back could be described in a word: a money changer scale. It was the sort of thing one might see in a history book. From there, it was the wife's job. She took the gold coin and compared it to a round reference object. It seemed she was checking its size. Satisfied with that, she then placed the gold coin on one side of the scale and a weight on the other. What was it called again? Weighed currency? Ains dredged up the memory, guessing at what she was doing. The first step was likely a comparison with the size of this country's gold coins, and the next was a check of its content. He watched as the gold coin sank, lifting the weight. The wife placed another weight on the other, and the two balanced. It weighs about the same as 2 of the kingdom's gold coins. So, would it be all right if we scraped the surface a little? You fool! Don't say such a rude thing. My deepest apologies. My wife has been terribly disrespectful. The village chief exploded in anger, harshly reprimanding his wife. Ains wondered if her words were truly worth such fury, and then he understood. So they thought it might be gold-plated. He hadn't even considered that, as he'd been more focused on the other important word she had just used. It's quite all right. You may even crush it if you wish. However, if the contents prove to be pure gold, I expect you to buy it at its full value, understood? No, I am truly sorry. The wife returned the gold coin, bowing her head. Ines hadn't meant to rebuke her so strongly and felt a little guilty. For some reason, she reminded him of his own mother. A mother who had been a bit somber, quiet. Maybe that's why, he thought, why I'm being a little gentle. Please, don't worry about it. It is only natural when conducting a transaction. No, but to the one who saved our village. I didn't intend to save the village for free. That makes us business partners, so please don't mind it. The relief on their faces was visible. It wasn't quite trust, but it seemed they had opened up a little. What did you think of the coin? The engraving is like a work of art, isn't it? Yes, it's truly beautiful. What country is it from? From a country that no longer exists. Yes, a country that has now vanished. Is that so? You mentioned it's worth 2 of your kingdom's gold coins, but with its artistic value, I believe it could be appraised even higher. What do you think? That may be true, but we are not merchants, so we cannot judge its artistic value. Haha, well, that is certainly true. Laughing, Ains pulled the gold coin back toward him. The chief and his wife also showed the first, albeit still stiff, smiles. At that point, Ines decided it was time to press forward. Actually, I have several of these coins. Our meeting here must be fate, so I wouldn't mind letting them go for the equivalent of 2 of your gold coins. He produced several more gold coins from his pouch and dropped them onto the table. From a short distance. They clinked against each other, producing a clear ringing sound. Throughout this, Momonga's gaze was not on the table. Beneath his mask, he was intently studying the expressions of the chief and his wife. I'd just like to break them down into currency I can use around here. Shopping with gold coins can be quite a pain, you see. Of course, you are free to examine them to your heart's content, please. No, that is a generous offer, but unfortunately, we do not have the means for such a transaction. Understood. Satisfied with the troubled look on the chief's face, Ines swept the gold coins back into his hand and returned them to his pouch. Now then, let us return to the matter of my reward. It is time we spoke frankly. I will be direct. How much can you give me? It was the same question as before, but the response was more advanced this time.
Sir Ains, to be perfectly honest, this village has lost many of its able-bodied workers. I am sure that if we turned the entire village upside down, we could prepare an amount that would satisfy you. However, to survive the coming season, it would be difficult to offer such a large reward. What about goods? It is the same with goods. With fewer people, we won't have enough hands to manage. If we give away our supplies now, we could face severe shortages in the future. Ains feigned deep thought. So far, so good. All he could do now was pray it would work out. He paused for a moment before answering. I understand. I require no reward. Oh, the chief and his wife's eyes widened in astonishment. Ains raised a hand slightly to signal that he wasn't finished. I am a magic caster from a place called Nazarick, located about 10 kilometers northeast of here. I have only recently ventured outside. Oh, is that so? Though I was sure that area was just grassland. With my magic, you see. I see. The village chief let out an impressed sound, and the wife beside him nodded her head repeatedly. By not finishing his explanation, he let them come to their own conclusions. There was a chance they might imagine something absurd and cause trouble, but in this case, he had no choice. Then, is your attire also something related to being a magic caster? Ah, well, something like that. Ains touched his mask of envy, his words vague. Did magic casters in this world dress in such suspicious-looking outfits? Or did they only think so out of ignorance? If it was ignorance, that was convenient. He could exploit that. Chief, have you ever met a magic caster other than myself? Yes, a long time ago, when I was a child, a group calling themselves adventurers visited this village. Among them was a person clad in a robe. I believe they called him a magic caster. Oh, then did you see this person's magic? No, unfortunately not. The adventurers left the village soon after.
They said they had come to gather rare medicinal herbs from the great forest. Did he wear a mask like me? He asked the question in a jesting tone. The chief's expression softened as he reminisced. It was as if he wanted to forget the painful memories of the present. No, he did not wear a mask, but he had a peculiar air about him. I remember being scared of him as a child. I see. Fear is indeed a useful tool. Just like my servant that you all saw, was it not? The gazes of the chief and his wife drifted away toward the lattice door. Ains followed their gaze. Through the gaps in the door, he could see the villagers working together in the plaza to clear away the dismembered corpses, and, standing a short distance away, the unmoving figure of the Death Knight. The fact that the Death Knight, which should have vanished after 100 minutes in Yggdrasil, was still present raised a question in his mind, but he forced himself to ignore it. I said that I require no reward. He paused here, watching their reaction. But a magic caster uses many things as tools. Fear, knowledge, you could call them the tools of our trade. However, I currently lack knowledge of this area. I would like you to provide me with information about these parts. And you must not tell anyone that you sold this information to me. Let this serve as my reward. There is no such thing as a convenient tale where someone wants nothing. As the saying goes, nothing is more expensive than something free. People fear what they cannot understand. He saves their lives, discusses payment, and then says he doesn't need money. Anyone with a sharp mind would feel something was amiss. In that case, he just had to make them believe they had sold him something intangible. In other words, he would make them believe they had sold him a tool of his trade, information. If they believed they had conducted a fair trade between equals, no one would question it, and dealing with an equal partner would also put them at ease. The chief and his wife nodded with determined expressions. We understand. We will never tell a soul. Nor will I. I trust you. He extended his gauntleted hand. The chief looked startled for a moment. Then, as if understanding something, he grasped it. Ains felt a wave of relief. So, the act of shaking hands exists here. If they had just stared at him, wondering what he was doing, he would have had no choice but to cry. And, though he had said, I trust you, he didn't trust them completely. In business, information flows for business reasons. When bound by character, it flows based on character. If this village chief was a man of integrity, the information would never leak. If it did, then that was the extent of his character. It would simply become a useful bargaining chip the next time he visited this village. And yet, for some reason, he felt they wouldn't betray him. He had his reasons, of course. If they had been driven by greed, they would have jumped at the chance to exchange the gold coins to bolster their savings. And when he dropped the other coins on the table, while they were surprised that he had so many, their eyes were not those of people captivated by greed. And perhaps it was because the wife somehow resembled his late mother. Am I a mama's boy? Ains chuckled under his mask, looking troubled. But it was a shame no one could see that smile, for it was likely the gentlest one he had worn since coming to this world, even though he was a skeleton. In any case, it's a wonder to me that you all are still willing to deal with me so rationally, even after I brought a monster like that with me. I've heard stories that magic casters can even turn evil into a weapon, and I hear that one of the 13 heroes commanded the dead. It is certainly terrifying. Oh, the 13 heroes. A fire lit in Ains's eyes. He had heard another important keyword. He would need to get more details. Ains made a note in his mental notepad and then closed it.